So what are you doing, I'm sorry?
So when it comes to folding up the plaid,
This is a great kilt.
Thank you.
This is a great plaid, yeah. This is actually literally the full 9 yards. Because Mom thought it was real funny, because, oh, she's a lace maker, she would have had enough money. It's why usually when there were more people with plaids, everybody was out there with like 6 yards, 7 yards, 6.5. I'm the one who's always last because I got an extra 3 yards more for them to fold up. But this is where the term whole 9 yards comes from. We're supposed to have more than that. It was a whole law. There's a whole story. Chuck would tell it, and he'd belly laugh about it, and he'd have fun. But moving on to this part. When it comes to folding up the great plaid, there's 2 measurements that need to be done. It's not an accurate measurement, it's a measurement for your body. There is from the elbow, the end of your middle finger.
That's a cubit,
Thank you. And then there's from your thumb to your middle finger.
which is a span.
Thank you. And those 2 measurements are the only ones you need for folding up this whole thing. All right? The reason being is from elbow to middle finger, them's your hips. It makes life a whole lot easier. So what I'm going to start off with is the first section here. I unfold. I then started using spans, and I lucked out with this particular pattern because every 1, 2, 3 fits my span perfectly. Does it work like that on all plaids? No. I have a nice red one that I just got a couple of years ago that, while it's very beautiful, it does not fit it. So I have to really focus on my spans. But I've been folding this one for literally 20 years. And so it almost becomes old hat. And so because it's done in such a nice grid pattern, I can just go up and then I pick it up and I fold it over. I try to make sure it's nice and even across all the way. And so that's one fold of the span. You gotta get that, those pleats across the back side. Now you see it on a lot of skirts. You see it on the kilts you slide up. They didn't have the kilt, 1,000 years ago. They just slid on, did 2 snaps, 2 buckles, boom, done, and you got a million pockets. Don't get me wrong. I love a utility kilt. I love mine. It's super handy. I got pockets galore because pockets are amazing and all dresses should have pockets.
Thank you.
Moving on, because patriarchy is stupid. Moving on. Now, I can just keep folding up. I go to the next line here. I do another span, pull it over. Once again, this is where a flat, smooth surface is beautiful. Back when I would use the grass, it's bumpy. Stuff's gonna catch on it. It doesn't stay even. I'm pulling up leaves and grass like I'm a Husqvarna tool, and I'm just cleaning the lawn. I don't want
And
it.
it's hard.
It's really hard to pull. It's like Velcro, but worse.
And one of the things you have to realize is this kilt was not just a garment. It was a multi-purpose tool. It was their sleeping bag, it was their raincoat, it was warm
Pockets.
in the winter, it was pockets to carry things. And also,
Multi-purpose.
it was multi-purpose for everything. They devised a way to carry it so the majority of the weight was on their hips, which is, if you think about backpacks and things now, that's where you want to put the weight to carry something. These are things that are heavy if you realize, what wool gets, and heaven forbid wet, how heavy they are. So it really is rather ingenious that they came out with a practical way to get the most of the fabric back onto their hips.
Because they're Scottish. If you look at all the things that either Scottish people or Scotsmen actually invented, the list is ridiculously long. It's because, oh, it's raining outside. Do I want to go for a run in the rain? No, I'm just going to stay inside and invent something. It's kind of what the Scots do.
Now, these were important things that were kept for a long time. We even have evidence that they were passed down in wills. Now, the whole thing with everybody's family tartan, for our era, forget about that completely. That is something that started after the 1776 battle at Culloden.
Wasn't it an Englishman who started it too?
Yeah, we'll go into that in just a minute.
I was hoping you would think.
So early on, all Celtic people, wherever they were fascinated by plaid or checkered cloth. That seemed to be one thing that was attractive to them.
It's genetic, but moving on.
So usually what they had is they had colors of dyes that were local to them. They had rocks like in seaweed, you name it, bark, frog, yeah. And typically the things local to you would produce colors that were very camouflaging. Particularly early on when with the types of dyes that they had, they tended to kind of blend in. So that actually was a good thing if you were hunting or doing whatever, you wanted to blend in with the terrain. They also had what they call regional plaids, preferred colors or sets of colors that were preferred by local areas. Now, there's lots of stories about how the family trafficking came to place. One of the things that happened at the Battle of Culloden, plaids were banned. One of the things to subjugate a people is to take away their national dress. So, because kilts were identified with Scottish people, they were forbidden to wear them. And so what happened is they ended up with a whole glut of plaid fabric down in the lowlands where they had all the factories and where they were beginning to produce all this stuff, and nobody to sell it to. Somebody who was probably ingenious went to the local lords and aristocracy and said, look, if you'll buy 20 bolts of red and gray plaid that I have, we'll name it after you. That became very popular. So what happened is all of a sudden you had a family or a castle or whatever that had a plaid named after them. That became a very popular, and to this day. The Marine Corps has a kilt. Sony has a kilt. All you got to do is pay enough money to have somebody design a particular plaid for it. Now, are there some houses in Scotland that have what they call the ancient kilts? Some of the plaids and designs that really were typical of, say, the MacLeods on the Isle of Skye, that really do go back. And some of those are so simple as a houndstooth check, or like a buffalo plaid that we think of, the black and red, or the blue and black. Some of those were actually popular way back in the day and do go back that far. But when people ask you about, is that your family plaid? The answer is no. They didn't have family plaids back in the dates that we're representing. Now, he's getting down to the end, and he's got a cubit not folded at the beginning and a cubit not folded.
Now, one of the things I like to do on this end is sometimes it gets a little uneven. I mean, I did just hand fold this sucker. So to try to get it a little closer, I'll pull on this end, just trying to take little chunks, try to watch where I've got little parts that are sticking out. Try to get it a little even, or a little more even, excuse me. Some days are better than others. There are some days where my line, you can just take a speed square to it. It's nice. At this point, before I get too wild and crazy and blow myself up about this, at this point, this is when I would actually change over to my tunic. At this point, the reason I put my belt over here, it makes it easier for me. I know other people put it different places. They try to leave it underneath when I'm not laying on it. I find that because of all the stuff that I'm putting on my belt, that becomes a real problem. So I do it while I'm laying on it because effectively I'm tacking down the fabric. So I've got this within arm reach. Now I try to keep this, depending on the day and depending on how cold it is at fair, because fair during the season can either be, oh my God, I'm turning into a snowman, or oh my God, I'm melting. So this guy I usually weave underneath, but I gotta fold myself up like a burrito. So I try to get this even, and if it's not even, it's not the end of the world. I can adjust it afterwards. So I get myself tucked in like that. Now I don't obviously fold up my own face because that's just weird.
Sorry.
There. Now, like Nancy was talking about, having stuff on your hips makes life a whole heck of a lot easier. All right, I usually keep a hammer on my hip out at fair, and so I've got a sheath for that. Get that lined up, get that. Would you scoot out the camera?
A lot of people will slide the belt underneath before they lay down.
Yeah, everyone's different, and I know the video of that guy online that's probably the most seen about how to fold this sucker up. He does it that way. Great, fine, cool. The other thing is, I find those belts to be way too skinny. Now, it might be because I'm holding not only 9 yards, not 6, but I'm also holding a hammer and a kniffy, and God knows what else.
Usually the kilt belts were 4 inches wide, so
Yes.
you don't want a skinny little belt for this. You need something.
This is my second one. Bought it from a vendor that I don't think is actually at fair anymore. Did great leather belts. There you are.
And sometimes it's helpful to have somebody else get you into the buckles.
Yeah. So I usually try to make sure, at least in my case, the way I set my stuff up, I make sure my pouch is roughly on the front of my hip here. Hammer, actually I scoot him a bit there, and then the knife's on the back. Yep, that's about right. So I can pull this guy down here. And at this point, I'm good to go. I just stand up. Now, yeah, I've got tons of stuff here. At this point, before I start tucking stuff in, making whatever I'm making for that day,
Usually the kilts come to about knee length. You don't want them way high.
and there are times like, that's probably a little low, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. And I try to get it even. Actually, it's not far from even. Oh, jeez.
The inside one is.
What in the hell was I thinking? Oh, I got it. I got it.
There you go.
Oh, come on. I'm not tugging on your kilts.
That's a little better. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when it's, when we know it's gonna be like 95 out there, yeah, it's gonna be a little higher, I don't want that airflow. But yes, it's a traditional. One, I get sick and tired of patrons asking me that. Secondly, first year back that I was coming out full time back in 2010, the argument was brought to quite a dead point because there was a gentleman at a different area who was wearing a kilt, and he decided, yeah, fine, I'll be around an oven with nothing underneath, stepped over said hot steel door, and burned something quite precious.
But also, it's a family show. We
Yes.
don't want any of our participants going regimental.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
And Chuck's answer when somebody says, what's worn under the kilt, his answer was,
One, I can already feel that it is August out there. Secondly, at this point, I usually take this one, tuck it back, take this one, and tuck it back. Now I've got a lot of fabric back here. I do have a bustle. So at this point, probably the one I do the most, me personally, I find whichever guy is about the longest, because after I folded myself up, it can change, but I usually find whatever is the point. I know. All right.
yet another use for eagle straps.
Yes, in fact, I have this one purposely made with the same colors as my most common target. Come here, Ma.
Now, we all need help getting dressed. Ladies, realize how often somebody needs to lace you up. This is their version of getting laced up.
Now, there's a couple ways to do this. The biggest thing that, at the end of it, to make sure the knot is on the bottom, not the top. If it's on the top, it's going to undo itself throughout the day, especially if you're, moving anvils, post vices, hot steel, hot coal, and having to tell newbies, you're doing that wrong, stop being a puffin. Pull harder, please. Go. Thank you. Now the reason I have the pocket here, the pouch, excuse me.
He's using that as an anchor point.
Exactly.
So-
Now you can use the belt if your ankle's long enough. For me, this just tends to work better.
And it keeps your pouch right where you
It does. It really does keep it. Now, this guy can sometimes slide. That's where these come in. So these are actually attached to the shirt.
He's got ties on the inside that'll.
Some people do
pull over.
ankles, the tie, and I used to. The ties just made life easier.
I came up with something like this.
I know.
As an
Who do you
easiest
think
way.
I copied? I copied it off of Michael's shirt that has your tag in it.
Okay. I wondered.
Come on!
You didn't copy, you strategically borrowed.
No, I'm gonna give you your credit. I straight up copied. I saw that on Michael's and on Bama's and I went, that.
And for those of you who don't know Bama was one of our former blacksmiths. He still is a blacksmith, but does not participate. And he wore his kilts very
Extra
short. And he would
Alliance.
always call on Bama to help us remove things from the fire, big heavy kettles, because he would do a little dance for us.
So this guy, I usually just tie in a bow in the back to make sure it's not too tight or too loose. Usually I hold my arms like this, that way it's about what it would be if I'm moving it full. A little more. There we go, that's good.
Just about.
Yeah, just a bow, that way in case I need to release it quickly, I can. Because it's still within my range of grasp. And then this little guy that Mom made for me, because one of the interns absconded with my hat, my older hat. And then I've got this one. Oh, it's all right. I effectively just gave it to him. This one just fits better. And there I
Any
am.
questions about the kilt folding?
It's pretty straightforward. It's not an uncommon one.